Trump is not just corrupt, not just a moral vacuum, but he is an ego out of control.
Trump is going where he said he would, loudly, brazenly, and for the second time. He's not overreaching, he's delivering.
I put the motion before the House. This House believes that Trump has gone too far. And opening the case for the proposition is Anya Trafamovia, the librarian, St. John's College.
I yield the chair to Mina Malalam, Chief of Staff. This House believes that Trump has gone too far. Trump has tanked the American economy with a $2.4 trillion deficit. But side opposition will tell you that Trump has not gone too far. Trump is gutting the global economy, but their side will tell you that Trump has not gone too far. Trump has ruined NATO, Trump has slashed global aid, Trump has all but abolished the rule of law, but the opposition will still tell you that he has not gone too far. Trump has deported American citizens to camps without fair trial, but the opposition will still tell you he has not gone too far. Trump's budget will deny 14 million American citizens healthcare. Would 15 million be too far? Would 30? This is just year one. But no, still the opposition will tell you Trump has not gone too far. Trump is intent on relegating women to second-class citizens. Trump wants to end free speech as we know it. He is bankrolling Israel's Gaza genocide, and he's cozied up to Putin while throwing Ukraine under the bus. And Trump single-handedly has set the history profession back God knows how many years by proving the great man theory of history right, as the single most destructive individual of the 21st century. But no, Trump hasn't gone too far. The noble Charlie Kirk will tell you Trump is not ambitious. If it was so, it is a grievous fault, and grievously has Trump answered it. I speak not to disprove what Kirk will say, but I am here to speak what I do know. Many Americans voted for Trump, and not without cause. America is in crisis. It is a democracy dictated by corporate interests, by disillusionment and disarray. But Trump is not the solution. In only 100 days, he has not only gone too far, he has taken steps to fundamentally unravel the Constitution of the Founding Fathers, paralyze the courts, and send the world lurching towards financial ruin. He has slashed US aid by 62%, leaving key humanitarian operations in Somalia, Haiti, and Myanmar adrift. At 3.8%, Trump has about as much hope of controlling inflation levels as he does trying to rein in his own inflated ego. In only 100 days, the Trump's family's net worth has increased $3 billion. That's about $1 billion a month since the time he took office. In that same amount of time, Trump has only signed 5 bills into law, marking the single worst performance to a start of a president's term in more than a century. The only thing that Trump has not gone quite far enough in is fashion. If you're going to use the fascist playbook, you might at least get Hugo Boss to design your MAGA hats. Madam President, thank you for the incredible honor of speaking in this debate tonight. I'm glad to see you hosting a debate on a president that has gone too far. Although you yourself haven't tried to force through rules reforms in the House, appoint over 50 of your friends to committee as Nepo babies, or strike half of the union's electoral officials, which in my opinion shows that you clearly haven't gone far enough. That being said, you still have over 4 weeks left in office, and I'm incredibly excited to see where you will go from here. On a more serious note, I'm excited and happy to see that members of the union, unlike our counterparts in America, are more comfortable with electing a highly qualified woman to the most senior office in this society. I hope that any American friends in the audience tonight are taking notes. On the subject of guests, those with an observant eye will have seen in the term card that Nayib Bukele, our president of El Salvador, will be paying us a visit later in the term. I hope that the president will ask him about his recent illegal incarceration of American citizens at the instruction of his American sugar daddy, who's currently pigging it out in his $400 million palace in the sky. Sorry, I meant gift of a jet from Qatar. Just yesterday, the USA was downgraded from its last AAA credit rating, with Moody's citing insurmountable concerns about fiscal debt and tax cut legislation. Getting an A, I should explain, Charlie, is something that you do in school. And I'd like at this point to apologize to my dear tutor, Dr. Laura Smith, who is speaking also on side proposition. I promise that you will have the essay next week. I've been a little too caught up in writing this speech. Actually, if there is any chance of changing the topic to Trump's America, I might have the essay half written. In 100 days, and by fiat alone, Trump has signed 70 executive orders and pardoned over 70 individuals convicted for the January 6th insurrection. He has rolled out, and then rolled back in, tariffs on over 90 countries. They say that the past repeats itself, but it seems that backsliding into the authoritarianism of the 1930s has come a decade early. To say he has not gone too far, as the opposition must, is to say that any one of the individually unacceptable acts, of which there are too many to list, are actually acceptable, and more than this, good. A vote for the opposition is a vote that it is good to storm Congress, to bribe escorts. It's a vote for a president who won't rule out the possibility of running for a third term because it is, quote, too early to think about, all the while making the lives of ordinary people immeasurably worse. Actually, it is measurably worse. Under Trump, you can be thousands of dollars poorer. Trump appointed Elon Musk to run Doge. Musk, a man that thinks that grass is something you smoke, and who thinks that a meme is when you cut 30 million people's pensions. After the neo-Nazi Charlottesville riot, Trump famously said that there are some very fine people on both sides, a sentiment that he clearly took to heart in appointing Elon, a man whose love of throwing Roman salutes is second only to his self-proclaimed love of ketamine. But then perhaps Trump and Elon is just the ultimate story of male friendship. After buying Twitter because he didn't have any real-life friends, Musk with Twitter can join Trump with Truth Social in the enviable company of probably not a lizard, Mark Zuckerberg, and in the I own my own social media club. Now, Charlie, I'm sorry you got left out here, but I don't think that having kids pretend to be MAGA youth for Instagram Reels quite cuts it. Trump is not just corrupt, not just a moral vacuum, but he is an ego out of control. He's a danger to himself and to others. He's authoritarian and impulsive. Now, it's a bit rich for the Union, with its recent leadership, to talk of presidents being authoritarian and impulsive. That being said, perhaps America could take a leaf out of the Union's playbook and try removing their president, even the ones that have been democratically elected. If you don't think that Trump has gone too far, at what point would you say that he has crossed the Rubicon? If your neighbor is deported in the middle of the night, probably killed, if books are burned, if there is martial law on the streets, if your sister isn't allowed to go to high school. Go on, Trump, go for the Gilead. Trump's whirlwind blitzkrieg of abuse in only 100 days spells a dark future for us all. I fear not only for America, but for the rest of the world. So vote. And vote for the proposition, and as you vote, enjoy doing it. Because in America, in a few years' time, at this current trajectory, you probably won't have such a luxury. Thank you so much.
I now look to Serene Singh, Christchurch College, to continue the case for the proposition.
As an American, I grew up on Disney, classic family entertainment. However, one character always fascinated me. It wasn't Mickey or Goofy, no, it was Donald Duck. Yeah, that Donald Duck, that cartoon duck with the temper so bad that even my uncle at Thanksgiving looked like a saint. But every time Donald tries, now in one episode, let me tell you about what Donald Duck did. I remember this very vividly. You see, Donald Duck was trying to fix up his old beat-up car. But every time Donald tries to start that car, the engine backfires. The horn blasts, doors are flying open, the steering wheel's wobbling, smoke's billowing out. But what does Donald do? Does he stop and fix the thing? No way. He slams the gas pedal harder and harder. No brakes, no pit stop, no mechanic in sight. Just pedal to the metal, baby. As a kid, I watched an angry duck stomp around, shouting nonsense and driving his little cartoon car into walls. I thought I'd left Donald behind when I grew up. But little did I know we'd have another Donald doing the exact same thing. Every time he breaks something, a law, an election's integrity, a democratic norm, he slams the gas harder. So when Americans and all of us today ask the question, has Trump gone too far? I say he's not just gone too far, he's still going too far. Only problem is this time, the car is America. So tonight, I'll show you how President Trump has gone too far through three powerful realities. First, division. Second, distraction. And third, deflection. If even one of those holds true for you, Trump has gone too far. You must affirm tonight's motion. So first, as a Sikh American woman, the central tenet of my faith is that we are all one. Many of us in this room believe this. Trump has sought to divide us from one another, two, from our allies, and three, even from the truth. In dividing Americans from one another, President Trump has fueled fear and resentment between neighbors. He calls political opponents vermin, brands immigrants as murderers, and attacks queer and trans Americans. According to the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, hate crimes across race, religion, gender, class, and disability have either increased or are projected to increase by more than 80% in Trump's America. His rhetoric has deepened hostility among family, friends, and everyday people, making Americans who once saw family and community see enemies. In dividing America from our allies, President Trump has praised autocrats while undermining democratic allies. He supported policies enabling the mass forced displacement of Palestinians, displacement they continue to resist and endure. He's threatened to acquire Canada and Greenland, floated military action in Panama, and publicly insulted NATO and leaders of the Ukraine, while defending dictators like Putin, Kim Jong-un, and Xi Jinping. This isolationist approach also divides Americans from number three, the truth. President Trump has made it harder for Americans to trust facts. And when Americans stop trusting the people who inform them of their public health, education, or their elections, they have nowhere else to look but towards him. He's told Americans that the economy is booming. While wages remain stagnant, homelessness has risen 12% in 2025 alone, and 1 in 5 children in the United States faces hunger in the wealthiest country on earth. He claimed he created the best healthcare in the world, while millions remain uninsured, and medical debt is still the leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the United States. He paints climate change as a hoax, while wildfires, floods, and extreme heat worsen every year. And indigenous communities pay the price. That's not just a spin, it's a strategy. Because when Americans do not know what is true, they cannot demand what is just. That's how he divides us, not only from each other, but from literally the reality we exist within. So second, distraction. You'll notice a pattern. When there's a real fire, Trump pulls out the alarm somewhere else. He doesn't address the root causes of crises. He manufactures new ones to distract us from focusing on real problems. I'm going to specifically address only 3: safety in society, safety for women, and safety for children. He claims he brings safety, law, and order, an interesting priority for someone who's been convicted of 34 felony counts. But his solution: build more prisons, imprison more people, punish, and repeat. Research shows that mass incarceration does not solve the issues that cause crime: poverty, mental illness, and addiction. It punishes people for symptoms of real problems. And if you still believe prisons solve crime, consider this. America locks up more people than any country on earth. holding nearly 1/4 of the world's prisoners. If mass incarceration made us safer, we'd be the safest nation on earth. But instead of reversing this, President Trump pushes us further into an unsafe reality, choosing handcuffs over housing, prisons over treatment. He doesn't just distract us from the real roots of crimes, he deepens the crises that exist. He claims that America is safer for women. President Trump says that he will protect women, and he does. But look closer at what he does and how he actually distracts us. He fuels moral panic about people who are transgender in sports, a policy obsession that targets a few dozen individuals nationwide. No, thank you. While distracting from over 40 million women, half of our country, who have identified a very clearly what the threat is of the real harm, which you all know is cisgender men. According to data by the National Crime Victimization Survey, over 90% of violence experienced by women is committed by cisgender men. But President Trump had banned books, not predators. He targets drag shows, not domestic violence. Under his leadership, women's healthcare access has plummeted, maternal mortality rates have risen, and survivors of violence face greater barriers in courts and in hospitals than perhaps ever before. Meanwhile, President Trump surrounds himself with men credibly accused or convicted of sexual violence, not removing them, but elevating them to decision-making positions. If safety were really the goal, the threats women experience wouldn't be invented, and the real ones wouldn't be ignored. He claims America is safer for children. In America today, the leading cause of death for children and teens is gun violence. Over 4,300 kids are killed by guns each year, and more than 17,000 are wounded. That is 60 children every single day. In just 2025, there have already been 177 mass shootings, and yet President Trump is silent. Instead of passing laws to keep kids safe in schools, he attacks teachers, slashes education budgets, and distracts the public with crusades against story hours and books in school libraries. Children are not unsafe because of what they're reading. They are unsafe because their classrooms are war zones. When you keep pulling fire alarms for fake fires, no one notices when the building you're in is actually burning. But here's the truth. You cannot fix a crisis you refuse to understand. So finally, my third point, deflection. President Trump doesn't look for solutions. He avoids accountability. He blamed election workers for his own loss, fueling a deadly insurrection that endangered lawmakers and law enforcement. He blamed Congress for the violence his words incited. He's weaponized immigration to shift blame, deporting asylum seekers without hearings, and detaining student protesters across state lines, not to protect Americans, but to silence dissent. He calls the press the enemy of the people, threatened journalists, and flooded the courts with lawsuits to avoid scrutiny. As a result, today, America ranks 55th in global press freedom, the lowest it has been in modern history. You cannot run a country by avoiding every mirror and blaming every fire on someone else. Mark Twain once said, "It is easier to fool people than it is to convince them that they have been fooled." So I have a tough job on this side. But tonight's debate has actually tested that, because 3 people have sat on this chamber's floor for the entire debate. You've stepped over them, you've looked past them, you've ignored them. They've been holding a jar at the back of this chamber full of critical issues that affect millions of Americans: shelter, hunger, gun violence, unaffordable healthcare, poverty, freedom, and autonomy. But we didn't ask who they were. We didn't ask what they were holding. We didn't ask to help them. That jar has been sitting there with them this whole time, and just like that, millions are left on the floor, silently holding everything he refuses to fix. Meanwhile, this flashy jar, filled with manufactured threats and political theater, grabs every headline and all of our attention, even in this debate. Trump's America does not solve real problems, it performs around them. If you did not notice that jar or those individuals tonight, that's not your fault. But if you leave still looking away, then he hasn't gone too far. We all have. The thing is, if we let those problems sit in the back of the room for long enough, we all start to believe that they belong back there. Out of sight, out of mind. But they don't. We must get close to that jar. We must feel its weight, because when the curtain falls, it's the people on the floor who are still bleeding behind it, and that is millions of Americans. So House, affirm today's motion, because Donald Duck was far. But Donald Trump, that's too far.
I thank Serene for her speech. To continue the case for the opposition, I look to Daniel Ogoloma, Regent's Park College.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends of democracy and friends of drama, and of course, Madam President, thank you for the honor of speaking in tonight's debate. I must say it's a historic and inspiring moment for me. Also, let me take this moment to congratulate you on making history in becoming the first Black woman to serve in this prestigious society as president. Well done. Now, on to the business for today. This House believes Trump has gone too far. But before we start passing judgment, let's ask, what does gone too far even mean? Too far to whom? The media, the woke left, or too far to people who are used to presidents who just have eloquent speeches for 8 years without action, like that former president from Chicago? Gone too far. The phrase itself is elastic, subjective, it's vague, and often used more as an emotional expression than a rigorous standard. It sounds like a phrase you use when your mates down the last pizza that you've already called dibs on. It implies that boundaries have been crossed, but which boundaries? Legal, political, democratic? Whose boundary is it? And perhaps most importantly, too far compared to what? Compared to precedent, to expectation, or simply politeness? Trump is going where he said he would, loudly, brazenly, and for the second time. He's not overreaching, he's delivering. So tonight, I'll show you that Trump is working within the constitutional boundaries, he's doing what he is democratically elected to do, and he's following through on the policies which will prove he hasn't gone too far, he's just gone as far as he said he would. Now, the proposition, of course, has continuously made the case that Trump is breaking the Constitution. They'll say he trampled democracy, ignored the courts, and is basically running the White House like it's a season 15 of The Apprentice. Here's the truth. Trump isn't breaking the Constitution. He's following it forcefully, but faithfully. Yes, he's signing executive orders faster than freshers sign up for societies they'll never attend. But is that illegal? No. It's efficient. Let's compare. Obama signed over 270 executive orders. Biden's crossed 160. Trump, he's simply operating just like every modern president trying to get things done in a gridlocked system. He's declared national emergencies. He's not the first. The National Emergency Act exists, and he used it. And if you don't like the law, blame Congress. Trump didn't write it. He just actually read it this time. And when the courts disagree with him, and yes, some did, he didn't ignore them, he didn't dissolve the judiciary or arrest any judge. And even in the case of Kilmar Albergo Gracia, yes, a deportation gone wrong, the system didn't collapse, the courts intervened, judges ruled, the administration was held accountable. That's not a president ignoring the law, that's the law working, even when the headlines get messy. Trump isn't going beyond the powers vested in him, as stated in Article 2 in the United States Constitution. He is using the powers of the presidency exactly as it is written, unapologetically, energetically, and in line with the mandate he was given. Trump isn't trying to abolish Congress. He isn't attempting to rewrite bills of rights, and he isn't throwing out separations of power to crown himself an emperor. He's operating within the framework, loudly and legally. Look, I know the Trump sequel rattled a few cages. It was like the reboot no one asked for that somehow still shattered the box office records. But this wasn't a political accident. It was a democratic choice. Over 60 million Americans heard the message, saw the chaos, weighed the controversy, and still said, let's make America great again. So rewind the tapes. His 2024 campaign was a checklist, not a poem. And guess what? He's ticking the boxes, and many Americans are winning. Young people. He's rolled out apprenticeships and STEM grants, created real jobs, not just LinkedIn dreams. As for the working class Americans, tax relief and energy infrastructure, more hours, more cash. The elderly, he's capped insulin prices in these first few weeks. Legal immigration, application queues cut nearly 30% thanks to digitization. So you tell me, if Trump's second term has already improved financial standings of students, workers, immigrants, and pensioners, who exactly has he gone too far against? Everybody's saying he's making big moves, he's shaking the foundations. I say, yes, that is the job. You don't hire Gordon Ramsay and complain when he's yelling in the kitchen. You don't re-elect Trump and act shocked when he's still Trump. Now, I know what my friends on the proposition will say, of course, but Trump supporters are uncomfortable with some of the things he's doing, and I say, welcome to bloody adulthood. I don't even agree with half of my own Netflix suggestions half of the time. No one gets a perfect match, and even Adele fans skip most parts of Someone Like You. Voters didn't pick a genie, they picked a leader. Someone who would, when handed the keys, drive, not spend the entire term adjusting the mirrors. It's messy, it's loud, but that's democracy. Let him do his job. Now, just imagine, you purchase a ticket to Jamaica, you board the flight, and mid-flight you experience turbulence, and the pilot tells you, guys, sit tight, because the route he needs to take might be ugly. It's a bumpy ride, but he still lands the plane safely at your destination. Will you say he went too far? No. I think you'd say, cheers, mate, rough ride, but we got there in the end. So let's be very clear. Trump isn't going too far. I just think we've grown used to politicians promising everything, delivering nothing, and calling it process. He, instead, is delivering what he promised, even if it gives CNN panic attacks every 45 minutes. Who gives a toss about Trump's tone and politeness, his language, or his tweeting? Trump is rude, they say. He's undiplomatic. He makes people uncomfortable. Well, so does honesty. So does follow-through. So does a president who doesn't apologize every 30 seconds like a British person walking through someone in a Tesco. Sorry. And yes, supporters of this motion will also say he's damaging America's international image. Look, America's image has been through worse. They once invaded the wrong country over bad intelligence and were still selected to host the Olympics like nothing happened. Trump being blunt isn't the collapse of diplomacy. It's just the end of pretending everyone likes each other in the G7 group chat. Here's the real threat to democracy. Politicians who talk a good game and do nothing, who run on dreams and govern on differing, who make hope a product but not a plan. Trump is certainly not that man. You may not like the method, but you can't deny the motion. Trump is moving. Friends, I'm not saying he's a political saint. He's not even polite, I know. But that's not the requirement to be president. If Trump unnerves you, maybe what we fear isn't overreach, it's accountability. So, I leave you with this. If democracy still means electing leaders and expecting them to do what they say they would, then Donald Trump hasn't gone too far. He's gone exactly as far as he is allowed to. Thank you all.
I now look to Laura Smith to close the case for the proposition.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's great to be back in Oxford. I suppose I really owe actually a debt of thanks to our friend Mr. Kirk here because, I'd love to think that my students would wait this long to hear me lecture. But to be honest with you, been here this long just because of him. But I must caution you, entertainment is on this side for you. Education is on this side. Now, I gotta mention one thing that has been a sort of running current through the argument that you've heard from opposition today, which is this idea of, he won. He got the popular vote once. He got the popular vote once. He did win twice, okay? But the assumption is that he therefore had a mandate. A lot of political scientists dispute that there's even such a thing as an electoral mandate, that people could actually take him at his word and that somehow Elon Musk was elected too. So you know what happens when you make assumptions, right? And I hate to use a Democratic dig here because it's got that connotation, but you make an ass of yourself. That's what happens when you make an assumption. Everyone knows that. Now, the word unprecedented is intrinsically associated almost to redundancy when it comes to Donald Trump. He is not unprecedented in being the first, he's definitely not the first president to try and push the boundaries of executive power to beyond its scope. He is even not the first president to do so in a time that is out of sync with his context. I can think of two other examples. Andrew Johnson, after the Civil War, he was America's first president to be impeached. Why? Because he wanted to welcome the Confederate rebels back with open arms, like the Civil War, just a bit of a brotherly scuffle, wasn't it? No problem. Oh, all these freed African Americans? No, let's not have any more civil rights for them. No. So he got impeached. He wasn't removed, but he was the first president to be impeached. Richard Nixon, here's another example of a man acting out of the context of what was acceptable in his times. No, he wasn't impeached because he was forced to resign. He lost the support of his own Republican Party. So what is the difference when it comes to Donald Trump, a president who's been impeached twice and not removed? He's not being held accountable. He's pushing against this for more executive power. It is not acceptable in the 21st century, but so far he is yet to be held to account. No, thank you. Presidents have formal powers and informal powers, but one of the key ones is, of course, executive orders. We've already heard it tonight. But I would just like to point out that there is a little bit of fake news over there, okay? So let me get the numbers straight. In his first 100 days, which is why we're here in the first place, Donald Trump signed no less than 147 executive orders. Now, to put that in context, Joe Biden signed a similar number, that's what you heard, but over 4 years, not 100 days. Big difference. So Donald Trump has brought up the yearly average executive orders since 1944, all the way through the modern presidency, since FDR. Now, he has also used his pardon power, his clemency power, another formal power. Most controversially, in his first 100 days, we already mentioned the pardoning of 1,500 January 6th rioters. Hugely controversial and a huge push in the use of executive power. He is the commander-in-chief, another immensely important formal power. What is he using it for? Well, so far, thank goodness, he's only organizing himself a birthday military parade. And how much is this going to cost, you ask? Well, The Guardian suggests it could cost up to $45 million American dollars for the American taxpayer to pay. Does this sound like the leader of the Western democracy, what they would do? He likes to create crises. Now, we all know that when there's a crisis, for example, he was in charge when there was COVID, when there was a crisis with Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, an economic crisis related to COVID, how badly he mishandled and mismanaged that. Why does he like to therefore create crises? Because he can control them. It's this idea of controlling. Andrew Jackson, a president he most admires, used to use the phrase, "I am the storm." That's the idea. It's like he wants to be the storm. He wants to control the narrative and create these crises. To establish himself as more powerful. Pushing back against traditional allies. Can I think of an example? Too many, but I'll give you a couple. Recently, he's got really keen on this idea of an Iran nuclear treaty. Wow, I feel like I'm in 2015 again. Wait, we had one of those. Oh yeah, it was under President Barack Obama. And yet, because it was associated with Obama, it became no more under Trump. And now he's trying to create a treaty with no trust whatsoever. He talked in his election about the Panama Canal. And most egregiously recently, in terms of the economy, his tariff wars, going after America's, one of their oldest and strongest allies, Canada. Why? Fentanyl. It's racing across the border. We got to stop it. It's dangerous. How much fentanyl comes across the Canadian-US border? 0.01%, I'm sorry, that's wrong, less than 0.01% comes across the US-Canadian border. And of course, I would be remiss to talk about Donald Trump if not to talk about immigration and his deportation policies. From the start of his political career, a mere 10 years ago, his immigration rhetoric rested on xenophobia and racism. And I'm not going to dignify this chamber by repeating some of it. What it has created is it has encouraged some of the worst of Americans and statements to come out, to feel vindicated. For example, in American campuses today, after his re-election 2024, some Republican student groups were actually encouraging their fellow students to report other students they believed to be there illegally. So you are now innocent, no longer innocent before proven guilty. He has been told by the Supreme Court, his own Supreme Court, one might say, considering that he appointed 3 of the justices, that he must return a man who should not have been deported to El Salvador's max security prison. He must return him, and he refuses to do it. The president has enforcement. He is utilizing this power to an extreme extent. Like this, he is mirroring Jackson. Jackson is the one who 200 years ago, almost 200 years ago in 1832, the Supreme Court said, no, Cherokees, Native Americans must be able to stay on their land. They said this to someone who had driven through the Indian Removal Act of 1830. And Andrew Jackson ignored it. Why? Because he was living in the democracy of the white man. That was almost 200 years ago. Thank God we no longer live in the democracy of the man, although I do notice a bit of a gender divide here, which may reflect the support that Donald Trump has and that gender divide of his own. Another really interesting thing I find about Donald Trump and his use of power and deportation and immigration policies creating the crisis, he seems to be really fixated on a potential genocide in South Africa against white South Africans. Nobody else has really heard of this. And yet, white South Africans, no thank you, you'll get your chance, Mr. Kirk. Like my students, they get their chance. So, these white South Africans are able to come and relocate to the United States, while others, including those of minority, racial, and ethnic backgrounds, do not get that privileged opportunity, the same privileged opportunity. Finally, I'd be remiss without mentioning Doge, of course. I mentioned before Elon Musk. I mentioned before how he was unelected. Getting hand cramp there, Mr. Kirk. Lots of notes. I'm looking forward to it. Oh, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. So, when it comes to Doge, we know that he is not the first president to try and reorganize and restructure the American government. William Taft there, 1909, 1913, he did it from a fashion of organizing, of steadying it, of specialism. This was a period in which Congress and he got together while he used unilateral power, got together and worked together to ensure that they had someone who was a specialist in government to steady it for almost 4 years before slashing. There was no chainsaw government. It was streamlining government, and it certainly wasn't denigrating those very unflashy civil service jobs that people do tirelessly day in and day out, and mostly thanklessly as well. So ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, in my final 30 seconds, 20 seconds, how do we judge whether a president has gone too far when the method that the founders gave us, the high crimes and misdemeanor, the last block of check, the impeachment mechanism, seems meaningless for a man who has been impeached twice? How do we hold him to account? Well, by the only means that we know how and that we've spearheaded. We must vote. We must vote in proposition. We must vote by democratic means to prove that Donald Trump has gone too far. Thank you very much.
I thank Laura for her fine speech. And now closing the case for the opposition and indeed the whole debate, Mr. Charlie Kirk.
Got my timer? Okay, before I begin my prepared remarks, I feel like I gotta run the gauntlet. First, I'll give you £1,000 right now if you could tell me the US citizen that was deported under Donald Trump. You said that twice. Yeah, the US citizen that was deported under Donald Trump. Can anyone tell me? £1,000, I'll give it to you right now. Yeah, name? Wrong, not a US citizen. Citizen El Salvador. Anyone else? US citizen, deported under Trump. Nope, that was a lie. You should know better than that. You go to Oxford, so that is a correction. Number two, can you tell me when it comes to Charlottesville, something that you said when Donald Trump said that there were people on both sides, he was actually talking about the statue debate, not what you said, so that's a hoax. That's line number two. Oh yeah, you said that somebody over here said something about Pete Hegseth being nothing more than a TV host. You should also mention that he was a service member of the military. Nope. Sorry, I'm gonna talk uninterruptedly. Thank you. Service member and was a decorated war hero. Funny you didn't mention that. Oh yes, January 6th came up multiple times from, you tried your best, but from you, and from the opposition. It's not an insurrection. You called them all rioters. It's funny. A small percentage of the people that were actually there on January 6th did anything violently. The vast majority walked into the Capitol building after they were invited. Also, back to your point, I certainly hope Reform and AFD wins. So I hope that it's not to teach Trump a lesson that he goes too far. We'll get to that in a second. Finally, the Donald Duck, really, like what was that all about? What is this jar? I have no idea what you're talking about in the back of the room. It's like, it's completely lost on me. So I don't know what that's all about. Also, on the Canadian border, the professor failed to mention that the Canadian border was closed. President Trump said fentanyl, and the amount of terrorists that are coming across the Canadian border, of which the most terrorists that come into America come across the Canadian border on the terrorist watch list. You did not mention that. And finally, professor, you never heard of it in South Africa. Interesting. You never heard of that. The fact that a major political party in South Africa says, quote, kill the Boers, kill the Boers. I would expect more of somebody who wrote a dissertation and teaches here at Oxford to say that you would not know about the attempted slaughter and genocide of white South Africans. Okay, now on to, I'm sure there's lots of POIs, and I will talk uninterrupted. Now to my remarks, but actually, is that all of it? Let me see here. Yeah, that's just a taste. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here tonight. Thank you to the Oxford Union for inviting me. I never went to university. I take that as a great compliment. So therefore, everyone who went to university should be able to run circles around me. You'll be the judge, but I'll do my best. Has Donald Trump gone too far? Well, I can nitpick at how vague that question is. What is too far exactly? Are his tweets too long? Can all of us even agree on what we're aiming at? I don't think so. The truth is this. If you dislike the West, and if you hate the West's values, if you think the West is evil fundamentally and deserves to be destroyed, then anything Donald Trump does basically short of surrender will be too far for you. If I was visiting this school 100 years ago, speaking in support of an American president, I think we would at least have some broad agreement on what a country's leader should be trying to do. But we don't anymore. I don't think it's because America's changed. In fact, I think it's because Britain has changed. From my perspective, Britain is one of the greatest countries in the history of the world. You were the country of Shakespeare, the steam engine, and Adam Smith. You defeated Napoleon, you destroyed the slave trade, you stood up to Hitler. My country, America, became great as it is because of what we inherited from you, from Britain. When I hear the slogan, "Make America Great Again," I'm also hearing, quote, "Return America to its British roots." Great Britain has everything in the world to be proud of. But when I look at Britain today, I see a country where the ruling elites are in a race to abandon the very values, the values that made them so great in the first place. I wish I could blame this all on labor, all on the left, but I can't. This country just had its 14th uninterrupted year of so-called conservative rule. And what did they conserve exactly? Well, they didn't conserve the ancient British rights to freedom of speech. In Britain today, 30 people a day are arrested for offensive posts on social media, according to The Telegraph. Praying silently within 600 feet of an abortion clinic can get you arrested in Scotland, as a 74-year-old woman named Rose just learned weeks ago. Members of Parliament scold British citizens for thinking they have the right to say that they do not have the right to say things that offend Muslims. 14 years of conservative rule didn't conserve British prosperity. Adjusted for inflation cost of living, the average British worker makes less today than they did in 2008. Outside of London, The British have lower incomes than every one of America's 50 states, and it never used to be this way. British industry pays 4 times as much for electricity as America does. You have the highest electricity rates in the world, a consequence of a choice of going net neutral. Nothing will kill a modern economy faster than high energy prices. And the country that invented the steam engine now has some of the highest energy prices on the planet. But above all, 14 years of conservative control didn't preserve the British nation. This country's conservatives thought it was their moral duty to allow anyone from the third world to move here. They didn't need to hold Western values. They didn't need to have useful skills. They could go on welfare immediately. Just last week, Keir Starmer announced he's changing the law to make sure immigrants who commit crimes are deported, because the conservatives never actually bothered passing that law themselves. The dying out of the British nation means the dying out of Christianity. Britain is the birthplace of Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterians, Anglicans, Quakers, and more. I would guess that more Christian denominations trace back to Britain than any other country. But soon, Britain will have more practicing Muslims than practicing Christians. I think that will be a catastrophic change, and everyone knows it. That's why it's only Muslims moving to Christian countries, never the other way around. I don't want America to go the way of Britain. I want us to remain free. I want us to remain rich and innovative. I want us to remain Christian. I don't want Americans to be replaced. But forget what I want. This is what the American people want. And in a democracy, the people are supposed to get what they want. The very same people that lecture us about democracy have a lot of problems with the consequences of democracy when the people vote a way that they don't like. And that's where Donald Trump comes in. When I was growing up, people would say that Britain was where America would be 10 or 20 years in the future. What they meant was that Britain was more left-wing than America, but we'd catch up eventually. That's just how things were over time, and nothing could stop it. I don't hear people saying that anymore. Donald Trump is the reason why. Almost alone, Donald Trump has changed the course of history. He's destroyed the assumption that the left's victory was inevitable. Under President Biden, more than 10 million illegal aliens entered America. Guides were published on TikTok explaining how to break into America. Say some magic words at the border, and nobody would stop you. Entire neighborhoods of American cities were turned over to migrants living on the dole. America was treated as a pile of wealth for the rest of the planet to plunder at will. Now that is all stopping. President Trump has cut border crossings, not 90%, not 99%, but 99.9%. For years, my country's leaders lied that the southern border was an unfixable mess. President Trump exposed them all as liars within weeks. But closing the door didn't fix the damage that Biden did. We have well over 10 million people in America who should not be in America. If somebody breaks into your home, you don't fix the problem by closing your door and locking it. Things aren't fixed until the burglar is kicked out. And President Trump has been fighting harder than ever to make that happen. But I'd be happy if we fought even harder. Of course, illegal migration isn't the only threat facing America. In Joe Biden's America, we had the tyranny of DEI. Even though America's Constitution explicitly forbids racial discrimination, our government ordered people to do it anyway. People were denied jobs and denied promotions. Kids were shut out of universities based on the color of their skin rather than their ability. Companies were denied federal contracts because their owners didn't look a certain way. People who didn't discriminate enough in hiring could be sued by the government. Every company in America lived in fear of their government deciding to target them for offenses against DEI. Trump has ordered DEI to be torn down, but I want him to tear it down faster. I want every university told that they're losing all federal dollars immediately if they don't stop racial discrimination. I want the Department of Justice to start auditing every federal contractor to find DEI and shut off contracts immediately wherever we find it. This is a kind of cancer that cannot be phased out. It must be ripped out from the core. The same goes for the toxic social contagion of transgenderism. In Joe Biden's America, public schools and medical organizations were co-opted into endorsing this insanity. They urged children just 10 years old or younger to take barely tested hormones and surgically alter their bodies. In some of America's liberal states, a parent who objects to their child's transition can lose custody. I've met detransitioners who escaped from this social poison. They tell me that getting sucked into the first place was the greatest mistake of their lives. President Trump has taken steps to stop promoting this lunacy. He's acted to protect women's sports. Another POI I meant to make. She said it's only a couple dozen. 890 biological men have stolen awards, trophies, and championships from women in America. It's not a couple dozen. Over 890 women were displaced by pervert men. That's why I want Donald Trump's administration and why I support it. It's mostly what I've gotten, but I want more of it. I'll be honest. We, the American people, we want more deportations. We want more peace deals. We want more woke colleges defunded. We want more DEI parasites to lose their jobs. The American people voted to put America first. And you know what? You should all too. This is my final point. Do I have to stop? Okay. I mean, you should want to, no, it's fine. I don't know the rules. It's fine. You should want to preserve and restore the greatness of Britain. You should want the decline to stop, and you can make it happen. Starmer wouldn't be saying any of what he's saying without what President Trump is doing. If you were honest with yourself, if you want a great Britain again, not a mediocre Britain, if you want a Britain that you could be proud of, you should all be wearing MAGA hats and cheering Donald Trump on every step of the way. Thank you very much.